In. But welcome everybody. My name is Casey Greer, and we're so happy today with us to have Dr. Thomas Porter for our Seeing Beyond Navigating Life with Low Vision series. This is going to be a series. We're hoping to do calls every 2 to 3 months. So definitely keep a lookout for our next call with Dr. Porter. And you are on the email list now for this series. So be looking in your email, be looking on social media, and we'll be posting about the next one coming up. I will send an email to everybody. I'll also send this recording in an email as well afterward for anyone who wants to watch it again or if you missed something. This first installment of our series is called What to Do When You've Been Told Nothing Can Be Done. And like I said, we are recording it and we will be taking questions. So put any questions in the chat, or you can verbally ask questions later too. So yes, I will hand it over to Dr. Thomas Porter. You can introduce yourself and get started whenever you're ready.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Tom Porter. I'm the Director of Low Vision Services at St. Louis University in the Department of Ophthalmology. I've been in practice limited to low vision for about 40 years now, and we see about 1,500 low vision patients a year. So if you do the math, that's a lot of people. Pertaining specifically to albinism, I probably see one a week is probably the average. So over the years, I've met an awful lot of folks with albinism, and I have a special soft spot in my heart for those of you who have albinism or someone near and dear to you. The idea behind this is so many of my patients would come in, and how they found out about me, I'm not really sure, but they'd say, "We were told nothing could be done." And I'm here to show you tonight that there's actually some things that can be done, and we'll kind of go from there. So, what now? Um, I've just said this. This is here. You are here because you're either a PWA or there's somebody near and dear, and you've been told this before. And the reality is that this is not necessarily true. One of the stories that I tell to try and hammer this home is the story about the three penguins, and the story goes something like this: a man drove into a service station, and this was back in the days where they had full service gas stations. And the attendant's filling the tank, and he looks in the back seat and he sees three penguins there, and he becomes very concerned. And he says to the driver, "You know, penguins are a big responsibility. My advice is you take these penguins directly to the zoo." And the driver paid for the gas and drove away. And the very next day, the driver's back in there, and those three penguins are still in the back seat, but this time they all have sunglasses on. And the attendant said, I thought I told you to take them to the zoo. Driver said, I did. We had a great time, but today we're going to the beach. And this message being sent and message received is really important in albinism. If a doctor tells you nothing can be done, maybe in medical science at this point, there's no way to fix the underlying problem. But I promise you, there is all sorts of things we can do to take the vision that a person has and make it function better. I'm going to go over a little bit of just background low vision terminology, and I'm going to contrast what I'm going to call the typical low vision patient seen in my clinic versus someone with albinism. So the definition is any level of vision that can't be improved with glasses, contact lenses, surgery. It is what it is. Low vision can be due to disease, trauma, or congenital conditions. And statistically, it's more common, honestly, in disease than it is in congenital conditions. Um, this is a huge problem in the United States. It's been estimated that about 40 million people fall into this low vision category. And because of the demographics in our country, it's going to double in the next 50 years. And the reason is pretty simple. The fastest growing segment of our population is 55 and older. AARP estimates that 10,000 Americans turn 65 every single day. So because aging and decline in vision go hand in hand. This is going to happen in our lifetime. Now, this isn't necessarily uh, addressed at albinism, but I want you to realize how big this problem is. Uh, the Vision Council estimates 1 in 28 Americans have a level of vision that can't be fixed that prevents them from doing basic activities for daily living. And one of the questions that we ask adults is, can you still read mail, bills, food package, medicine bottle, bank statement? Those are 5 basic activities for daily living that are critical to maintaining one's independence. Um, in the in the general population that I see, if you ask a senior what's the number one thing that would limit their independence, it would be driving. But the reality is, if you can't do those 5 basic tasks, your independence is severely threatened. And as I've learned from driving seminars with Chuck Huss, a good planner can still get around even if they can't drive. So, you know, I'm not sure that that always is applicable to the albinism community. Um, albinism, low vision's been changing recently in North America, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Um, when one's visual acuity falls below 20/50, these functional skills, as well as safety and independence, and specifically school achievement, are threatened. And so, if you need a number, if it's below 20/50, you're going to have reading problems, just all sorts of functional issues. So, I hate visual acuity as a criterion, but that's a good one that we work with teachers and such. So, I'm going to compare my adult low vision population and then my children. Um, as you'll see here, in the adult population, it's disease process. The big group I have age-related macular degeneration, second biggest group diabetics, then glaucoma, neurological problems, cataracts, something called retinitis pigmentosa. But if you look at this, this is all related to disease. But on children, retinopathy of prematurity, which is a congenital problem, optic nerve hypoplasia, which is a congenital problem, albinism, and albinism and nystagmus go hand in hand, as you all know. So again, it's a different mix. And as I go further, I'm going to point out why this really works in the interest of that group with albinism. So good news, bad news. The good news, the bad news, I guess, is what I should say first. Bad news is that right now medical science doesn't have a way to fix it. The good news is I'm going to introduce you to ways that we can help. Okay, so I'm passionate about children and young adults, and this 2050 acuity level that we talked about is really critical to school performance. Kids really have all sorts of ways of coping and adapting, but again, there are things that we need to keep in mind there. Um, ad- this is again one of these contrasts between adults with a disease process like diabetic eye problems versus somebody with, let's go ahead and keep saying, albinism. Um, Adults with acquired vision loss are always comparing things how they used to be, how it once was. Congenital conditions, this is normal. This is the way it is, and I'm always amazed at how good youngsters are at developing coping mechanisms. Sometimes they're not the best coping mechanisms, but they figure a way out. Um, it's been estimated that 80% of a child's learning in the primary grades comes from visual input. So it is important that we figure out a way to help these folks. Um, Most kids figure out coping mechanisms on their own, as I mentioned before. Um, I'm a big proponent that every person with reduced vision needs to have a low vision evaluation so that they're introduced to things that can be done. Unfortunately, 85% don't get this. And so, in some of the different areas, you're going to have to do a little searching to find someone who is skilled at providing low vision care. So, I'm going to go over some basic things on albinism. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you all know this, but there may be that one person that's never quite put the pieces together the way I hope to do it tonight. So, it's a congenital condition. It's not a disease. That the expression that we use in my clinic is, "It is what it is." That means that I don't have to worry about things like declining vision with age, or having that conversation that the patient sitting in that chair may end up with blindness someday. Albinism is not a progressive disorder. Those with albinism don't make the normal, that, which is so critical for normal fundus. The two eye pictures I've got there, the lower one is a normal retina. The upper one is one with albinism, and you see how much lighter it is, and you can see all these little blood vessels and things that are covered up by the pigment in the lower one. And another thing that I want to point out to you, in this lower one, there's a red spot, a red cherry spot, sort of right in the middle right here, and that's called the macula. And in albinism, we have what's called macular hypoplasia, low plastic, and it just has not developed. And this is variable. There are people with albinism that have fairly normal looking fundus and some macular reflex, all the way to the group we have at the top. Um, Okay, we hit that. In the US, it's been estimated that 1 in 17,000 have some part. I know you all know this. Um, there are several types of albinism, wide variation on vision. Um, One of my colleagues, one of the eye doctors in our practice, has albinism, and she's best corrected at about 20/60. Today in the clinic, I had somebody with albinism that was best corrected at about 21/20. So you can see these two people, approximately the same age, different vision. Um, Going back to that macular hypoplasia, and this is a crude analogy, but I always say, where's the bullseye? The macula is the bullseye, and I'm going to see if I can get my mouse to show you right there. And if any of you have played darts or shot bow and arrow, the bullseye gives you the highest score. And the further away from the bullseye you get, the lower the score is. And that's how darts work, and archery and such as that. Well, in vision, if light focuses directly on the
An
macula,
eye. That's an eye.
if all
Wow.
okay, so uh, the macula gives us the sharpest vision, and you can imagine the worse the macular reflex is over here on the right, the worse the vision is going to be. So that's kind of how it works. If you don't have a good, healthy macula, then your visual acuity can't be sharp, crisp, clear like some with normal vision. Reduced vision, and 2050 to 2800, and the sensitivity to bright light and glare, which is called photophobia. My best childhood friend when I was growing up had albinism. We just thought that he bleached his hair, and he was really photophobic. Always wore very dark sunglasses and a hat, and we just thought that he was cool. Um, Nystagmus is very common. That shaking, that swaying back and forth, and the more intently one fixates on a target, the more likely the nystagmus is to build up. Folks with albinism, I see them farsighted, nearsighted, but very often with a high level of unequal curvature or astigmatism. But that foveal hypoplasia is the key thing that reduces vision. Um, it's not uncommon for the eyes not to work together as a team. That means that folks with albinism very often don't have great depth perception. Because of this lack of pigment, the iris, the colored part of the eye, will do something we call transilluminate, which we shine a light in and we get a reflection through the iris. Um, it's, again, not uncommon to have crossed eye strabismus. Um, so, a word or two about nystagmus, because some of you may have nystagmus. It's the repetitive, uncontrolled movements that results in reduced vision. It can be congenital. Most often it is. I've seen it after head trauma in an accident. I've seen it after drug toxicity. I've seen it after illness, but most of the folks with albinism that I see, it's a congenital condition. It can be reduced somewhat by what we call the null point. And some of you may, when you're really trying to fixate on something, turn your head one way or the other, or some folks will lower their head. But what that's doing is reducing the excursion of the nystagmus. There's more than one type. Horizontal is the most common, and that's a swinging side to side. It can be vertical, and I've had 3 or 4 cases in my career of rotary where it's in a circle. It can go slowly one way and then jerk back the other way. That's nystagmus. It's more common to have pendular, where the speed and the movement in both directions is about equal. So enough on things you know already. Let's get into something you may not know about. The beauty of helping folks with vision loss is the reality is we're only manipulating 3 different variables. I always think about baking cookies. When I was a bachelor, I still love chocolate chip cookies, but I really loved them as a bachelor. And I found that I needed 3 ingredients. I could go to the grocery store and I could buy pre-made dough, cookie dough. That's ingredient one. Number two was chocolate chips, and I mixed that with the dough. And number three was an oven set at, I think, 350. There's my 3 ingredients. I had chocolate chip cookies. And it's that simple, the concept of what we're going to do in helping low vision. So these are the ingredients. Every single patient with vision loss has something we call reduced contrast sensitivity. And I'm going to explain that in depth. But contrast sensitivity is the eye's ability to visually separate what you want to see from everything else. One of the things that we'll often hear from folks is my vision's cloudy or foggy or hazy. And as an eye doctor, we assume that means blurry, but no, it's not. It's quite different. Second variable is if you can't make things sharp, you've got to make them bigger. You've got to make it magnified somehow, some way. And there's more than one way to do it, which we'll talk about. And then finally, a patient has to modify their behavior and use their vision most effectively. As I've said over and over, because albinism is a congenital condition and it's present at birth, patients do very, very well at learning adapting skills. And if they need to modify some of their behavior, they're very good at that. So, what's contrast sensitivity? Well, this is an illustration of it. The more different the object that you're trying to see, the more different the object and the background, the easier it is to see. And these are 2 of our pooches who have not been barking yet tonight. And same same day, same snow, but Bella is the black one, and she is very easy to see, and Daisy disappears. So again, contrast sensitivity is that ability to visually separate what you're trying to see from the background. Every single patient with reduced vision, and I'm not talking about just somebody who needs glasses, but reduced vision from disease, trauma, congenital condition has contrast sensitivity loss. Often they don't know how to complain about it to the doctor, but they have it. It's absolutely 100% of the people that I see have some contrast loss. Patients with albinism have a loss of contrast sensitivity, but it's usually overlooked because of the glare sensitivity. Glare hurts. People with glare sensitivity hurts. And again, you all know that. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. Parents that may have a child with albinism, you know how the bright lights really glare hurts, contrast loss affects function. So these 2 things go hand in hand, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So as I mentioned, glare hurts. There's more than one kind of glare. The first kind is reflected glare, and many of you have had polarized sunglasses, and you know around water, sometimes a snowy day, that reflected light off the water or off the snow is a killer, and a polarized lens helps that. Veiling glare is actually one of the more disabling glares for folks with albinism. Veiling glare is when the light is so bright that it just washes out everything you're trying to see. And for those of you who are normally sighted, a good illustration of that is when you're driving into the sun. First thing in the morning when I'm driving to work, I'm driving east into the sun, and at a certain angle, it is so bright that I, I put my hand up. I can't see. Veiling glare is the primary glare that affects folks with albinism. And then there's scattering glare, and scattering glare is uh, light hitting an uneven surface and going all different directions. Cataracts cause scattering glare. A lot of the corneal problems cause scattering glare. But the big one again on albinism is veiling glare. I mentioned it before. Glare hurts, glare affects performance, but contrast loss affects function very, very much. I'm not a big proponent of gray sunglasses, and here's why. Gray lenses, um, well, the way a tinted lens works is it has two factors, two variables. One is the darker the lens, the more light it cuts out. The color of the lens, uh, certain colors cut out certain wavelengths of light. And by reducing certain wavelengths of light, we can enhance contrast. A gray sunglass lens cuts it uniformly across the vis, visible spectrum. That's hard for me to say tonight. Um, and because of that, you don't get that boost in contrast. You're only going after glare. So I really, really like to work with my patients on enhancing contrast. There's three ways to enhance contrast. The first one is lighting. And you don't think about lighting in albinism because most folks with albinism are so light sensitive. But you do need some light to be able to do things by study, read, things like that. And in recent years, lighting manufacturers have come up with lights that allow you to adjust not just the intensity, not just the brightness of the light, but something called the color temperature. Um, you've probably noticed with LED lights, some of them are white, 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 and some of them are yellow. And that's color temperature. And the ability to adjust the color temperature and the brightness, you can come up with that sweet spot, which is the best kind of lighting based on your eye condition. So again, I'd encourage you if you need lighting to to study by, I call them task lights. That's something that you really might want to look into. The second thing that I've already talked about, figure ground relationship. The more different you can make an object from the background, or the background from the object, the easier it is. There's a school teacher that I worked with last year, and we had a youngster that was extremely light sensitive, and we just covered his desk with black construction paper, and it really made a big difference in how he was able to work in the classroom. Reduce glare, increased figure ground relationship, which increased contrast sensitivity. But the most commonly used is appropriately tinted lenses. Um, it's a little bit tricky. It's art and it's science, but again, appropriately tinted lenses will really help performance. Contrast enhancement is probably the most overlooked variable that many of you can do for yourself, and it's so helpful. That's like my chocolate chip cookie thing. You leave contrast enhancement out, and you've left one of those three ingredients out. The balance of glare and the contrast enhancement is the trick. You've got to make the lens dark enough to cut the glare so that there's comfort, but the right color to bring out the contrast. And in albinism, it's very common that I'm working in colors like orange, dark amber, brown, but again, there are variations there. Okay, so again, I said it's more art than science. Um, Virtually every patient with reduced visual acuity, regardless of the cause, benefits from contrast enhancement. So I always say, don't let an eye chart lull you into a false sense of security. If you think about it, when the eye doctor flips that chart up there, it's black against white. And in the real world, there are very few black and white objects. We could make our list now. We've got eye charts and penguins and Dalmatians and Jesuit priests, and it goes down very rapidly. The real world is low contrast. I don't know if my camera is still on, but I've got light hair, light skin, light eyes. There is no contrast, and the everything that we judge, stepping off a curb, food on a plate, turkey breast, mashed potatoes, cauliflower on a white plate and on a light tablecloth. Those are low contrast. So don't overlook the contrast. The second thing is if we can't make it sharp, we've got to make it big. We've got to magnify it. Um, the I'm going back to you normally sighted folks that are tuned in here. If you're nearsighted and the eye doctor puts the eye chart out there, you may not be able to read the little row, but as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually you come to a target size that you can identify. But if you're really honest with yourself, it's not clear. It's just big enough that you can work with it. And that really is the principle of magnification. Make it big enough that you can do the task that you've outlined. So if you can't make it, you got to make it bigger. We're making blurry images big enough to interpret. I never have kidded myself that I make it sharp and crisp and clear. But it boils down to we need to know what you need or want to see and figure out a way to make it big enough that you can see it. It's not that complicated. Um, if you can't make it sharper, you have to make it bigger. And the first way is the one you're all familiar with, large print. Um, Large print's been around longer than I've been around. The problem is if you double this, let's take a book. If you double the size of the print, you quadruple the number of pages. And that is really not acceptable. It's no longer a large print world. Um, Go to the local Applebee's and ask them for a large print menu, and chances are pretty good they won't have one. The second thing is called relative distance magnification. And this picture should look familiar to every parent around. What that little guy is doing is getting close enough to that TV set that in his mind, in his eyes, it's a 70-inch set. It's not that little 32 set. Relative distance magnification is the first thing that young folks do to provide themselves with magnification. The closer they get, the bigger the image. And contrary to what we as parents, we've told our kids they're going to ruin their eyes, blah, 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 blah. Reality is it's probably not harmful, but it requires a lot of focusing ability, something called accommodation. And accommodation takes energy. And as you can imagine, hours and hours and hours of holding a textbook 3 inches from your nose, eventually the eyes kind of wear down. Um, I've always found it fascinating that grades 1 to 3, children are learning to read, and from 3 on, they're reading to learn. And what else happens? The volume of reading that they have to do goes up as the grade goes up. So a fourth grader doesn't have as much reading that he has to do as compared to a ninth grader. And the font goes down smaller and smaller and smaller as we progress. So you can see this is sort of like the perfect storm that's going on to cause problems. Yes, kids can grab something and crank it onto the end of their nose and do it. True. But what we want to do is be able to get that same level of performance and have it not require quite as much energy. And that's where you get into some form of magnification. We're going to show you a couple of ideas. And these are not products that I think are appropriate. I'm just showing the concept. Simple magnification with an optical lens or some sort of video magnification. Video magnification can be, pocket magnifiers like this. It can be computer software now. There's a brand new application that's just hit the market. That it's more than an attachment to your iPhone, but it takes your iPhone and makes it into a video magnifier, kind of like this. Um, I always reassure parents that it's not a 2020 world. 2020 is not the goal. Um, the newsprint's about 2060. At my local McDonald's, it takes about 2080 vision to be able to read the menu. Most second grade reading material is about 2080. Um, I don't know who did this study, but grooming takes 50 to 2100 acuity. I went to our local Six Flags amusement park, and I'm pretty well convinced many of the people there have worse than 2100 vision when I saw the outfits they had. But again, independence is threatened when it falls below about 2060. All these magnifying devices, whether it's an optical magnifier, a telescope, a bioptic telescope, or any of the videos, they're simply tools. And there is no such thing as a Swiss Army knife. You've got to have the right tool for the right job. Uh, for instance, we a first meeting with someone is a little difficult because they may not understand this whole concept of visual goals. If someone comes in and they've been diagnosed with albinism, and they say, "I just want to see better," you know, it's not a good start because I can I can do all these things I can do, but I can't make things the sharp, crisp, clear. But if somebody comes in and says, "Look, I can no longer read my mail," or "I need to be able to see 2100 on an eye chart to get my limited driver's license," those are those are specific goals, concrete goals. I had a gentleman in not long ago who is an organist in a church, and all he wanted to do was to be able to read the organ music, and it's a very specific goal. And by having a specific goal, it's measurable whether you can actually achieve that goal or not. So I look at my job is very simple. You come in, outline, and I encourage you when you do your low vision exam, go in there with very specific types of things that you're hoping to achieve. And then it's just a matter of matching the tool to the goal. Um, if you go for a low vision exam, remember to outline the duration of the task. If all you want to do is watch the hummingbirds for 15 minutes at the hummingbird feeder, that's a pretty short task. If you want to read War and Peace again, that's a long duration task. Working distance, the organist, it's different than somebody that says, all I want to do is be able to read the return address on an envelope. Visual fields are not an issue typically with albinism. However, we do need to know if there are visual field limitations, and are there any physical limitations. I had a gentleman, I've been taking care of him for 30 years now, and he's done very, very well. But this year he shows up and he tells me he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So now I know, in addition to his eye problems, I've got a tremor that I've got to work with. So job specific, and this is just very, very brief. A hand magnifier along those lines is really only meant for very, very short spotting tasks. Stand magnifiers have typically been the go-to for longer duration tasks, although they're really falling out of favor. I can't tell you the last time that I prescribed a stand magnifier like that. Strong readers, they work well, except the stronger the reader, the closer the working distance. So for longer tasks, we're going to video all the time, whether it's the little pocket thing that I just showed you or a stand. And then more and more and more, we're using one of the softwares that we can use on a computer. Dragon is one, Jaws is one, Zoom Text is another. Um, and a little trick that I hope you folks are using. Um, you can certainly use the video out on your computer and buy a 32-inch monitor TV set at Walmart and hook those two, and you've got a huge big screen which has a magnifying effect. Um, the only way to magnify distance objects is with some sort of telescopic device. It can be handheld, like the little one in the upper right. It can be sort of an off-the-shelf wearable, like the one in the middle. Um, and we can custom design a pair of glasses that has a miniature telescope attached or built into it. Those are all things that can be done to give you magnification at distance, and each one has strengths and weaknesses. One of the questions that I'm asked about all the time is driving, and driving regulations vary by state, and it should. The driving conditions that we have in a rural state like Missouri is quite different than if I was in, say, New York State. So you investigate what your particular laws dictate. That's the first thing. In some states, we can fit the patient with a bioptic telescope, and I've I've literally done 1,000 of these in my career. The actual technical part of fitting the telescope is not a huge challenge at my point, but the critical thing is not actually my part. It's learning to use the telescope in driving conditions. And one of the things that I have talked with Casey about is the possibility of having not a full day of it, but a shortened driving seminar so that one of my colleagues and I could go over the training part versus the telescopic part. May do that in the future. Visual rehabilitation, that was that third leg of the stool. And that's really modifying a patient's behavior. These patients have to accept and learn that they're going to do things a different way. So, visual rehabilitation is pretty straightforward. It's really helping patients restore function. Typically, in visual rehabilitation, it's to maintain or gain independence. As I said, it isn't really an issue with folks that are touched by albinism. If a child we're working with, we work with the school to help coordinate services, hardware, and other accommodations. And my hope is that all of you that have children, that as part of the IEP, there's a low vision recommendation too. Um, and we're going to kind of go. So where are you going to get help in your community? It's a problem. I would start by asking advice of your local eye doctor. Who in my community, who within a 100-mile drive of is uh, skilled in providing low vision services? That's where I'd start. And don't be overly surprised if they don't have a name. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality. Every state has a commission for the visually impaired. In Missouri, where I am, it's Missouri Rehab Services for the blind and visually impaired. They have providers that they use and pay for low vision evaluations. And while they, in my state, they don't pay for children, they can certainly tell you who those people are. Every state has a local ophthalmology and optometry society, and they should have a list of providers that do low vision work, and they should be able to do it. And then finally, university eye departments is it's a requirement that ophthalmology programs and optometry programs have a low vision department. Uh, if we didn't have one at St. Louis U, I'd probably be a checker at the local grocery store. Um, and then one thing I guess I didn't put it on here, but I think um, everybody today is friends with Dr. Google, and Dr. Google can tell you the names of the manufacturers of low vision products, and most of them have a database of where their accounts, where their customers are. In other words, if Dr. X buys these products that are used for low vision, then that's probably a good place to start. So unfortunately, low vision patients, regardless of the cause, tend to be the most undertreated and under-referred patients. But today's a new beginning. You're armed now. You know what can be done and what it kind of looks like to get started. And I think that that's a good thing. Um, uh, Education is a strong tool, and I think that we're starting off on the right foot. This is my personal email address that I've got at the bottom there, And if you email me, I'll try my darndest to answer you within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes my job gets in the way, but I'm happy to do it. And Casey, that's pretty much where we are right now. If you want to open this up to questions, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you so much. That was amazing. If anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can just go ahead and ask as well. I know some of you are muted as well. You can unmute yourselves if anyone has a question.
I didn't do that good a job.
Yeah,
Come
Doctor.
on.
Yeah, Dr. Porter, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for this presentation. My name is John Rosanico. My 5-month-old grandson was just diagnosed with ocular albinism. What what advice could you give us as a family? I know he's started some therapy with a local agency,
Uh-huh.
and
So, I'm going to tell you as if you were my neighbor. In our metropolitan area, the Delta Gamma Foundation works with children from birth to about age 5. And once they start school, we encourage them to get their first low vision evaluation. And we work hand in hand with the local children's hospital to try and get some of these patterns started. So uh, I'm sure that by now the little guy's been evaluated by a pediatric ophthalmologist and been told that this isn't a disease process, and on and on and on. But again, it's important to keep the ocular health um, looked after, and then as he develops. Another thing too, and I'm going to put a commercial in for Noah. Stay close to these folks. I've been absolutely amazed. I guess 10 or 15 years ago, I was asked to do a lecture when they were in the local area, and I had no idea how important it is for this select community to have the resources of this. I, that's probably not not what you're looking for, but that's where I would get started.
no, that helps very much. And so you're saying around the age of 5, is that when they can start to really see,
Right.
how low the vision is around that age?
It's way more
Time?
measurable at that time. Listen, I've got 100 stories, and I'm not here to entertain you folks, but one of my I, I have this albinism community within my practice, and I remember this girl when she was probably 12 years old, and I said, "Hey, mom, this isn't like we're going to have to get her a long cane and all these things. If if the teachers are smart, you're smart, and I do my part, there's very little she won't be able to do. She probably won't fly a jet plane, and she probably won't drive a racing car. Doggone it, if about 6 years later I get a picture of her with a checkered flag in front of a go-kart, and it's like I've got to change my spiel now and just say jet plane. So you know let's not do the glasses half to empty on these folks. It's really quite the opposite. Even those that have pretty profound vision loss, there's a heck of a lot we can do as the years go by to make them function higher.
Dr. Porter, we actually have
Yeah,
3 questions in the chat. If you can take some more, I can
Sure.
read them if you'd like.
I'm good for till
All
you guys
right.
go away.
So the first one in the chat says, I missed the beginning of your talk. You may have already mentioned this, but when you're looking for a good pair of sunglasses that might be tinted to a specific color to help reduce glare, do you need to go through a specialist to find the best fit, or is it possible to find a good quality pair on your own?
Oh boy, that's a great question, and it's a little bit difficult to answer. If you really do your research, I think that you can probably do it online. It's not going to be the standard gray green. You're going to be probably more likely in the browns and dark ambers and things like that. I Is it okay if I call on someone and ask them to unmute and say their experience? Casey?
Sure.
Ian, are you still on? Yes, no? Let me
Who?
see if I see.
Me?
Yeah, are you?
Yeah.
Ian, tell them your experience on us trying to figure out what's the right tent for you, and that different tents
Um,
work and sometimes they don't.
um, I like the No IR website a lot. I've been using that. Um, how my photophobia got to where I was using the darker and darker gray lenses, and then started looking into resources for achromatopsia, which is a vision condition, or genetic inherited with missing cones, and so they'll only have night vision. Um, and they don't really see in color, but they use very dark red lenses for comfort. And so then I started using more of the orange, red, amber, um, and to try and see my phone outside in
Perfect.
sunlight, but the red is a little bit hard.
And we found that the lens that you see best when you're out there in the bright sunlight is not the lens that works best when you're inside. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I have like gray and green. I have a pair of glasses that have a pretty dark tint, like for indoors especially. Um, that's a green and it's comfortable, but outside I notice I have a lot more eye strain with the green
Right.
tint, and outside in sunlight it just doesn't seem to be like feel that dark, or the oranges and reds. Things won't look as dark, but it will be much more comfortable. But it
Yeah.
doesn't. The brightness
Yeah.
is a lot more even, no matter how bright the sun is, because the red orange makes it
Right.
much more uniform.
So thanks, Ian. I appreciate it. As a general rule, and hear this whole thing through. The more towards the yellow end of the spectrum, the more contrast enhancement you get, but the less glare reduction you get. Red gives you probably the most glare reduction and gives you contrast enhancement. So the midpoint of that is orange. And if I was going to recommend somebody to get started with an over-the-counter tent, it would be orange to dark amber, depending on how light sensitive they would judge themselves to be. So long answer to a short question.
Awesome. We have some more. The next one is any suggestions as far as aids to address veiling glare with new types of headlights.
Boy,
That's Chuck Huss.
yeah, that man. These new LED headlights are killers on normally sighted folks. And as a driver, we really have to worry about using tinted lenses and driving. It's the lenses that enhance contrast, distort colors to some degree, and I always worry about distorting the colors in a stoplight. The red, the orange, and the green. So it's very much, I'm afraid, trial and error on trying to pick out something for night riding or night driving.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, Ashley says, hi, our son is 1 and has strabismus in both eyes. We've been told he may need surgery, but we're looking to see if there are other options or something else that would help. What advice could you give for this situation? Gratefully, Ashley.
But, so I really have to punt it back to the eye doctors that are seeing this little guy. Strabismus, it's very difficult to train it out to eye exercises and things like that. It's more likely that it will require some sort of muscle surgery to get the alignment correct. I you want to be darn sure you're going to a really good pediatric eye doctor to get advice from. But there's really nothing directly in the low vision realm that would address that issue.
Great. Our next question is, my daughter is 3 and it looks as though she may be favoring one eye over the other. Is this her focusing on the null point?
Well, everyone, normally sighted or with any of these conditions, has a dominant eye, just like a dominant hand, you know, and it they will often favor one eye over the other. So that in and of itself, I'm not overly concerned about. However, I'd really love, if she were my patient, to get some feedback. Is the vision approximately equal on each eye? And if not, then it's a sign that she's developing amblyopia or a lazy eye. The nystagmus, if she's just turning her head or having an unusual head posture when she's really concentrating on things, she's just demonstrating to you that she's developing a null point. And almost all of my patients with um, nystagmus develop some sort of a null point.
Great, thank you. Next, how do we assess glasses color for infants?
It every, everything about working with a youngster before they're old enough to give you subjective feedback. Until they're old enough to do that, we have to depend on information that you give us about light sensitivity and such as that. And when I say trial and error, I'm not talking about you ending up with 100 pairs of glasses in different colors, but it's been proven there are certain color ranges that most often are helpful, and none of them are harmful. So if, let's say that you bring a 5-year-old to me and you say that when we go boating, she pulls a hat down over her eyes, it's telling me she's got moderate to high photophobia, then I would probably go with a fairly dark amber lens for those activities. If you tell me that when she's sitting at the breakfast table that she's pulling a hat on and such as that, then that's a different level of tint. But until they can give some feedback, I called on Ian because over the years we've worked with, gosh, it seems like 100 different tints, but that's an exaggeration. But he can give me the subjective feedback. When he was 5 years old, well, Ian's pretty special, but when he was 5 years old, he probably couldn't have done that. So you can see that a certain amount of this, you just have to go from years of experience.
Great, those are all we have in the chat right now. Anyone else?
Great.
I have a question just about the transition lenses that they use.
Mhm.
I have actually my optic lenses here right now. These are the ones that I use to drive with. I've just
Mhm.
recently started driving, and well, for a couple of years now. And these ones, they'll change, they'll get darker in sunlight and stuff. But in like right now, you can see them getting a little darker, but they work really good. I highly recommend them well, they work for me anyway. I don't know if it's.
But transition lenses have improved with every different generation of transition lenses. And what many patients are not aware of, I keep talking about these exotic colors. There's a couple specialty lens labs that can make these transition lenses in these more unusual colors. It isn't like every local lab, but I've used transitions on a number of bioptics such as you've got. I'm not opposed to them. I tend to use brown a little more often than gray because of a brown will give a little bit of contrast enhancement and still give you the property. But the doctor's really done a good job with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're very handsome in the bioptic too, by the way.
We do have a few more actually in the chat, if you don't mind. Someone said, any thoughts on light therapies?
Um, I, I, I've personally never used light therapy, and I really don't think that I'm probably the one to answer that question.
Alrighty, I think any more? Does working from home and being on a computer hurt the eyes? Any advice?
Um, there's working on the computer is at home. I wish I could work at home, by the way. It doesn't damage your eyes. So don't think that there's something that's going to happen where you're going to, but it can be very tiring. And, you need to just use good judgment on when you're getting fatigued. There's a silly little rule, but it actually works very well on people using computers. And we've all heard of 20/20 vision. Well, this is called the 20/20/20 rule, and that's about every 20 minutes you stop what you're doing and stare at something at least 20 feet away for about 20 seconds. And what that's meant to do is relax the accommodative mechanism, relax the focusing mechanism. So it kind of breaks that, that dead man stare that we often get when we're really, really concentrating on our computer. There are computer tints. They're typically very light yellow tints, and the evidence is not 100% that it's helpful. Again, as I said on tints before, it certainly wouldn't be harmful, but it's very subjective whether you feel that it's helpful or not. And these typically are available either as a prescription form or over the counter. And if you want to go to one of the websites and try it, it would be worthwhile probably.
Great. And Liam has been sharing some thoughts in the chat. Wraparound styles have been the best for me.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just saying thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Liam, for that. Anyone else? Just want to make sure we get everybody. So we do have another. My son is type 1A. He is 3 years old. He reads very close to books. When should we start considering using a magnifier?
I'd say about age 5. There's a magnifier and it looks very much like a paperweight. The magnifier isn't suspended above the print like grandma's magnifier. As I said, it looks like a paperweight. And gosh, do I have one on my desk? No, I don't. But you set it down on the page. It's solid acrylic. It's almost impossible to break. And that's often what we'll start a youngster with as a first introduction to magnification. So, in fact, if you want to Google it, I think bright field magnifier is a description of what I'm talking about.
Great. Someone said, will the meeting recording be available later? Yes, it will. We will be emailing this shortly. A lot of people are saying thank you. Thank you, Liam. Said dome magnifier. Yes, I believe that's what he was talking about, the dome.
Right, a dome magnifier, bright field, Visilette. There's a lot of terms for it.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Porter. Anyone else? Last call?
Yep. Let's do this again sometime.
Yes, we will. This is a series. We will be back. We will be emailing all of you with the next installment in this series. And we want to thank Dr. Porter so much for coming. And thank you so much for an amazing presentation. Thank you for all your questions.
Casey, do you want to give real quick, Dr. Porter, your email address one more time if people didn't catch it on the screen there?
Absolutely. It's very easy. It's Tom Porter OD. So it looks like Tom Porter Rod at msn.com. Tom Porter OD at msn.com. And as I said, I've enjoyed all of my years with you guys, and I'm not going to let you down yet. I'm going to make you guys fire me.
We love to hear it.
It'll never happen. This is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Porter.
Okay, everybody, take care.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.